Hey, I'm Liz Loza, and this is Facts versus Feelings, your amuse bouche to your fantasy focus main course. We are bringing more fantasy, more facts, more feelings, and of course, more fun. And now that I have your attention, today's fact is that the result doesn't cancel out the experience. Well, hello, producer Quentin. It is nice to have you on Facts versus Feelings because what is this show without a little aura farming?
Hello, Liz Loza. I might be perhaps aura farming a little bit because, as you can see, I got the new haircut. So perhaps that's
low taper fade.
Little taper fade, and sometimes, as we were talking about, you gotta mix it up and take some chances. So I'm like, no hat, new haircut. We'll see how it goes.
I mean, no better time than to take bold action than in the fantasy playoffs. How many of your teams are advancing?
2 of the 3. The only one that's not so good is the one that we're in a league together in, and that's Fantasy Focus League. My other 2 leagues, I got like a frisky title contender and then like a pretty decisive title contender. So we're feeling really good, Liz, going into the fantasy playoffs.
Have you clinched a first-round bye in either of those?
The one that is a pretty decisive, yes, I have. I'm the 1 seed in that. And then the other one, I'm the 3 seed. I'm going to commit the Liz Loza Cardinal Sin. I am leading that league in points for, so you might be able to say I'm the best team,
Such a crutch, but I will allow it. I will also allow our viewers to like and subscribe to this videos. In fact, I would encourage it. I would also encourage that they continue to call our voicemail line. Q, why don't you tell them that number?
It's 914-348-1893. And Liz, when do we check that voicemail?
We check them every Monday. Also, you guys have been awesome with the voicemails. We are loving all of the crash outs, the cash outs, the questions that you are leaving. Feel free to call about your fantasy team, about advice, about yourself. I mean, this is what Facts versus Feelings is all about. So let's finish the season strong with a lot of wins and a lot of great content. In fact, Q, why don't you just play the disclaimer so we can get right to it?
Fantasy football is a game of inches, luck, and irrational confidence. Proceed with caution, trust your gut, and remember, side effects of listening to this podcast may include spontaneous victory dances, mild trash talking, and the belief that your sleeper pick is better than everyone else's. Take the facts of fantasy football seriously, but consult your feelings before making any lineup changes.
You didn't see that coming.
All right, Liz, let's start with the player who's provided a really enjoyable experience for fantasy managers thus far and may help you win your league.
Well done, Q. Well, it is Drake May. Everyone who has rostered him has got to be happy because he is Fantasy's QB3 overall, averaging 20 fantasy points per game. He ranks 2nd at the position in passing yards, 4th in passing touchdowns, but he is no statue because he's also managed the 3rd most rushing attempts at the position behind only Jalen Hurts and Josh Allen. Now, Q, you might be saying, well, what's the problem? And the problem is the matchup potentially against the Buffalo Bills, because it is true that May struggled against the Bills back in week 5. He managed his lowest fantasy point total of the season, in fact, in that game. But I'm not worried about it. Why? Because we just saw the Bills give up over 280 passing yards and 4 touchdowns to Joe Burrow. Plus, this game is New England and the division is on the line for the Patriots. So I believe that May has evolved since week 5. His chemistry with his pass catchers is clicking on an even better level right now. Plus, the over-under in this game is set at 50.5. So we are expecting fireworks. I have him ranked inside my top 4 at the position.
I think you're right, Liz. That's pretty bang on. I think the matchup's a little bit juicier than people are giving it credit for. Now, moving along here, someone we have next is someone who's been the definition of a reliable experience, but might not really give us the results we've all been used to so far this season. What do you got here?
Oh, it's Jonathan Taylor. And I say this as someone who rosters him in a league that is advancing to the playoffs. So I am in the conundrum myself. It's interesting. I mean, that's kind of the best thing about my job, right? When I am in a sticky situation, I get to dig in on it and find clarity for myself. And what I found was that Jonathan Taylor has averaged just 11.7 fantasy points per game since Indianapolis's week 11 bye. That's not particularly surprising when you also realize that that average has correlated with 3 straight losses. And Jonathan Taylor performs, unsurprisingly, much better in wins, but the amount is staggering. 31.4 fantasy points per game for Taylor when the Colts are winning. Just 11.5 fantasy points per game when the Colts are losing. Now, none of this bodes well as we head into a Week 15 matchup where the Colts are 13.5-point underdogs at Seattle. So again, they're even on the road. That's not great. And Seattle has allowed the 7th fewest fantasy points to opposing running backs. Another blow to the confidence of starting Jonathan Taylor. Oh, wait, there's more. Phillip freaking Rivers is expected to be under center. So we are not imagining a lift for this offense, which is probably going to screw Taylor's efficiency. And yet, I cannot sit him. And fantasy managers probably can't either. So what I am imploring you to do is, if you can sit him, by the way, if you have managed some depth that I am unaware of, girl, go do it. But if you can't, because running back is running back, then find all of the juicy upside you can, whether you're using your defensive position or your flex position. You gotta sky for the ceiling knowing that Taylor is going to underwhelm in Week 15. And by the way, if he doesn't, just be pleasantly surprised.
I will say too, I think we might be looking at potentially a 2-star review experience for Jonathan Taylor with that matchup and that situation that's going on in Indy. Speaking of the number 2, let's talk about a wide receiver 2 that might have had a better experience thus far this season than his wide receiver 1 counterpart. But the quarterback at play, it's a little bit of risky business.
Whoa, well done there. I appreciate the wordplay. Yes, you've encapsulated the entire Vikings offensive experience in that intro. This is not something we have to rub in the faces of Justin Jefferson investors, but Jordan Addison has emerged as surprisingly the more reliable of the two pass catchers for the season. Addison has drawn 13 red zone targets. Justin Jefferson, just 10 such targets. Also, Addison has drawn 17 targets to Jefferson's 10 over the last 2 weeks. And Jefferson, by the way, has had just 2 catches in back-to-back games. So Addison is seeing more volume and he is producing more as a result of that. He's actually coming off of a game in which he was the team's leading receiver, not to mention this giant opportunity he has in an exploitable matchup versus Dallas. The Cowboys are allowing the 2nd most fantasy points per game to opposing wide receivers. Minnesota is currently a 5.5-point underdog, so we expect that J.J. McCarthy is going to be chasing points. Now, we're not really excited about his efficiency, but that should mean more volume for Addison, and volume is always king in fantasy. So I have Addison ranked as a high upside flex in the wide receiver 30 range.
Yeah, that volume is king with Minnesota, and you got to love that matchup as well. So we'll see how Jordan Addison plays out when the reviews come in. I think that's all we got. Are you ready to kind of hit the couch now, Liz?
Oh, I like the way you said that. Yes.
This is a safe place. It's a place where we can feel free sharing our feelings.
Now let's get comfortable on the couch and dive into fantasy therapy, a safe space for all of your fantasy football questions. All right, Producer Q, what are the submissions? What do we have?
So first up, we got a little bit of a crash out from Kevin from Cleveland.
Hey Liz, this is Kevin from Cleveland. Please explain to me why the Falcons refuse to use Bijan as a workhorse running back. They're killing me.
I get it, Kevin. I absolutely understand. I, too, roster Bijan. I am frustrated by the fact that he has just 7 total touchdowns on the season. Now, I think people be like, 7? That's kind of a lot. But he's the RB13 in total touchdowns, which is not what you want from potentially your number 1 overall pick back in August. I will say that he also had a really tough matchup last week. Seattle had allowed just 4 rushing scores on the season. So I don't think it's just the usage, though that is certainly a part of it. I also think it was the matchup. Hopefully you advance to the playoffs, though, because the good news is that the Falcons matchup this week against Tampa Bay is much softer. The Buccaneers have struggled to defend the run as of late, so I am expecting a bounce back for you and I on Thursday night.
I might have to play the villain role a little bit here because I got to play Bijan in the playoffs. So I'm actually hoping that he's out top 20 of RBs. I'm very much
Phew.
against Kevin this time. I'm sorry. I got to look out
Poo,
for
poo,
number.
poo. We don't need that energy here. Move on.
Boo, boo, boo. That's right. All right. Well, let's move on then to next up. We've got Matt Aragon, who is looking for help. And this is a little bit of a dicey situation here.
Okay.
He's the number 1 seed, and he's needing Daniel Jones' replacement for the playoffs. And his options are J.J. McCarthy, Tyler Shuck, or Shadur Sanders.
Oh, gosh, this is messy. I am proud of you, Matt, for getting to the playoffs. And we know that Daniel Jones is out for the season. So we're going to take this week by week. We're going to stream. I think we have to look at the matchups for each of these players this week. In week 15, it is between J.J. McCarthy, who has a great matchup against Dallas, and Tyler Shuck, who has more rushing upside against Carolina. Now, I believe that Shuck earlier in the season managed around 18 fantasy points when he played the Panthers. McCarthy, though, could deal because he has better weapons. I have them back-to-back in my rankings, essentially. But I do think after seeing Shuck's rushing potential on full display in Week 14, that is the direction that I am leaning. And I really hope it works out for you.
Yeah, Matt of Aragon, we are doing our best to send positive vibes your way. And speaking of positive vibes, let's end a little bit more upbeat here, Liz.
Okay.
Nick is going to call in to celebrate a big win.
Liz Loza, what's up? It's Nick in Boise, Idaho. I am in the playoffs, and I can thank Michael Wilson for that. That guy just went off for me.
Yay! I love this for you, Nick. And also, I love that you use my first and last name. That I find that so endearing when people do it. I also love, shout out to Boise, Idaho. Humpin' Hannah's one of my favorite spots when I am in Boise, believe it or not. I've been there a couple of times. Anyway, Michael Wilson, I know, a little reveal magnifico, if you will. Michael Wilson was one of my favorite players coming out of Stanford. I love that he has gotten this opportunity to shine with MHJ sideline. In fact, a little stats to back up those feelings, if you will. Michael Wilson has cleared 100 receiving yards in every single contest this season in which MHJ has been out. MHJ, by the way, let me check my notes. 0 games of 100 or more receiving yards. So keep an eye, obviously, on the injury reports, but congratulations. Let's keep the good times rolling. Maybe even at Humpin' Hannah's.
Ooh, little Michael Wilson at Humpin' Hannah's sounds like a good time to me. All right. Well, I think that's all we've got for fantasy therapy. And as always, make sure to call and leave us a voicemail at 914-348-1893. And Liz, when do we check those voicemails one more time?
We check them on Monday, but call whenever you like. Today, we're bringing on someone who is a living, breathing sports database. He's a content researcher here at ESPN. In fact, you've probably seen him on FF Now, stumping the castmates with weekly trivia questions. He has a calculator brain as well as a heart of gold. Please welcome to the show, Mr. Kevin Pulsifer.
Hi, Liz. Happy to be here. Long-time listener, first-time caller. But I got to say, I'm running out of fantasy trivia questions for FF Now. It's the end of the year.
This is good because maybe by the time I'm back on set in Bristol, which I think is just in 2 weeks, I'm there in week 16. Oh my gosh, maybe that's sooner and I should buy a ticket. Anyway, maybe by then the questions will be easier and I can actually get one right.
I'll keep that in mind. We'll keep going.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for giving me a solid. All right, so instead of looking too much into the future, let's look at the right now. It is week 15. It is the fantasy playoffs, and obviously we're shifting strategies a little bit right now. Can you talk about what you personally do as we head into the last few weeks of the fantasy season?
Yeah, so the benches on fantasy teams in playoffs should look drastically different than they do on draft day. When you're doing your draft, you want some rookie wide receivers, some younger guys who you hope might pan out throughout the year. Some of those stable guys like a Romeo Dobbs who might just be able to fill in on a bye week because you know you're going to have to deal with that as the season goes on, along with injuries. But now that you're in the final couple of weeks, it's now or nothing. Like, you don't want to hold somebody in case something happens in a week or two. You don't want them to hopefully get a little bit more of a target share moving forward. You want backup running backs. You want extra defenses. You want to play matchups ahead of time. Just one example, there's a couple of lineups where I've got the Bills on my bench right now, the Bills defense. They're only 45% rostered and they're facing the Patriots this week. There's no way I'm playing them right now, but they get the Browns in week 16. And I don't want to have to fight everybody else on waivers for the Bills defense next week overnight. when I could just get them now for free and just put them on my bench. Things like that. You want to be planning for what you're going to need to do in the future weeks. You want the backup running backs in case somebody gets hurt. You want the extra defenses, and play for that last minute upside. Because if you got here, you have a good enough lineup to compete, and you just need to make sure that all your holes are filled out on the corners.
Okay, so what about, though, like I roster Jonathan Taylor in a league in which I have made the playoffs, but I did not clinch a first-round bye, largely because of his dip in production. I don't think that that's going to change over the course of the season, but also I don't feel comfortable enough starting like Kyle Monunge, for example, ahead of Jonathan Taylor. So who are some of those guys that aren't so wild, like Chimere DK, for example, but like actually could be a flex?
I think you could still have one or two spots on your bench for guys like that. Chimere DK, Darius Slayton, a little bit of foreshadowing there. Guys who, if you think you need like the 20-point, the 30-point upside, if maybe your 1 o'clock players don't go off or your early slate players don't go off, you can have a little bit of room for that because, like you said, Jonathan Taylor's probably not going to put up those 20, 30-point games that you've been getting for most of the year. But you don't want to hold on to somebody who's just going to kind of fill in the gaps there. You're not benching Taylor. We only have 2 weeks left. You
Right.
make that decision now.
Exactly.
You know he's going to be in your lineup. So maybe have a couple guys that you want there for upside, and then you can play it out as the week goes on. And in some of those leagues where maybe you had Jonathan Taylor and you were coasting into a playoff spot, whether it was a bye or not, maybe somebody dropped Mike Evans after he was hurt and out for most of the season.
Perfect example.
I have him on my IR. And even if he doesn't come back this week against Atlanta on the Thursday night, he's back in week 16, back in week 17, and all of a sudden you've got a guy that you can put in your flex and feel like he's going to be a real starter for you.
I love that advice. I think it's very cogent. You also are someone who, in addition to having feelings, as you've expressed, love to work with the numbers. I mean, you're a researcher. So is there a stat that you think managers tend to overhype, particularly in the playoffs?
When I saw this question, I gave it a lot of thought, and I kept coming back to the same answer for each one. Every stat can be overhyped if it doesn't have the proper context. And there's just a couple examples here that I've got. Yards per route run is something that people like to use to qualify receivers as good or bad. And in general, I think that stat is great. If you look at minimum of 40 targets for this season, the top 9 names, Jackson Smith-Njigba, Puka, CeeDee Lamb, Drake London, George Pickens, Amon-Ra, Diggs, Rashee Rice, Nico Collins, that is a list of some of the top receivers in the league. But 40 targets isn't that small of a qualifier. Like, you've got a lot of those part-time players in there, and Luther Burden's number 10. And when we were sitting there after 5 or 6 weeks, Luther Burden was actually number 3. And everybody was like, oh, Luther Burden's going to come out of the bye. He's going to have the post-bye rookie bump. We're going to start seeing more out of him. Ben Johnson's got to use him more. But if you actually look at the context, over 40% of his yards came on one flea flicker against the Dallas Cowboys. And I remember that play, watching it on Red Zone and just being like, that's a really cool play. But it's also a trick play. Dallas was caught off guard. Most receivers in the NFL could have made that play. And that play is one of the main reasons why he's popping in a yards per route run stat, because he was only a part-time player. They were using him for gadgety reasons. And a lot of times when you see these guys go from smaller usage to bigger usage, the yards per route run, the efficiency doesn't stay there. It drops a little bit.
Right.
Somebody else like Woody Marks, who's kind of a little bit more of a smaller build running back, who was splitting time with Nick Chubb and was actually being pretty efficient with it. And now that Chubb's kind of gotten a little bit less in usage, Marks has seen like 20 touches in 3 of the last 4 weeks, I think it is. He saw 28 touches against the Chiefs, and he looked tired. He looked slow. He even had to pull himself out of the game after one tackle because he was just getting so beat up. And he's not the kind of running back that can handle that kind of workload. So yes, the touches are good. Yes, the efficiency was good, but you got to be able to manage both, or at least see what the stats for what they are.
Let's flip the script a little bit. So we talked about potentially overhyped stats. What about those that are overlooked by fantasy managers?
One thing that I think fantasy managers don't do enough is look at like median output instead of just like the average or the mean. It can get rid of some of those outliers, like we talked about with the Luther Burden example. I remember after, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, people were talking about how Amari DiMercato for the Cardinals, the running back, should be getting more work. People were pulling up his game log page and his football reference page and saying, look at this, he's got like 6.8 career yards per carry on over 100 carries. That's not a small sample. He should be getting more work in that backfield. And on the surface, yeah, why wouldn't you give more work to the guy who's ripping off some 30, 40-yard runs, whose career average is close to Jamal Charles's career average? But if it sounds a little fishy, it probably is, and it requires a little bit more digging. out of those 120, 130 carries in his career, he only has 5 that were more than 20 yards. One of them was while they were up 31 in the fourth quarter. One was when they were down 26 in the fourth quarter. One was when they were down 19 in the fourth quarter. One was when they were up 15 in the fourth quarter. And one was on a surprise halfback draw with 12 seconds before halftime when the defense was playing back and they were expecting passing. So every single time that he's had an explosive run that is contributing to that 5 or 6.8 yards per carry, it's only because the game's in hand. It's a 1% win probability. It's a 99% win probability. Those stats, yes, they help you for fantasy. They absolutely do. And you love them. You want to see all that play. But looking forward, you do still want to say, hey, he's not actually producing most of the time.
And I really do hope that people understand that when we do our work, because Kevin absolutely helps me on a weekly basis. So like when I write my facts versus feelings column, I am always trying to quantify those things. A number can represent as close to a reality as possible, but there is always some tweaking to be done. I am interested, Kevin, to hear if there was a stat that most surprised you this season.
Yeah. So I was actually looking at the Lions-Rams game for this week, which 55.5 point total, going to be a lot of scoring. Play everybody in that game. But it was specifically something that I noticed. Davante Adams, he has 25 end zone targets this year. Not only is that by far more than everybody else, only 14 teams have more than 25 end zone targets.
Ugh.
And he has 14 touchdowns on end zone targets this year. Only 2 teams have more than 14 touchdowns on throws into the end zone. Matthew Stafford and Davante Adams are a perfect connection. There's nobody else in the league that's doing anything like them. And he's as sure a bet for a touchdown as any wide receiver is in fantasy.
And it is working. So you have to take, again, I love this, Kevin, the context of the record and how the particular thing you're examining is affecting the holistic environment of the ecosystem, rather, I guess, of the offense.
Yeah. So Adams has 25 end zone targets. Puka has 3. We saw him get his first career game with 2 receiving touchdowns last week.
Correct, yeah.
And he made some amazing plays, and he gets there on yards after the catch a lot. They give him some handoffs on end arounds, and he scores on those. He's obviously still a guy that's a must start, no doubt about that. But the Rams have the inside track to the 1 seed. There's no reason for them to start throwing Puka the ball in the end zone more.
Yes.
That is Davante Adams' zone. They like you said, they have a plan and it's working, so they're not going to change it. So like if I'm making a bet this week that one of them's going to score a touchdown and I'm filling out like maybe a parlay or whatever, I'm looking at there, I'm going to pick Adams over Puka all the time.
No one is sitting Davante Adams or Puka Nacua this week, but we are going to have to make some tough decisions. So which player are you most confident about sitting in week 15?
So it probably isn't just my Jets bias, but it might also be my Jets bias. But Breece Hall is kind of in that like nebulous RB2 flex range. I have many shares of him. And when you're thinking about starting guys in the playoffs, like you said, with Jonathan Taylor, you know the output's not going to be there. But you got there with him, and he's still prone to breaking big plays. He's just a touchdown away from being usable. There's still enough other good skill players around him that like he can still have a functional day. Breece Hall doesn't have much of that. After Tyrod left with the injury last week, watching that offense just completely crater without him, I have no confidence in starting Breece Hall. Yes, maybe I got there with him this year, but I think it was probably more in spite of him than because of him. He only has 1 game all season of 20 fantasy points, and it came against that terrible Bengals defense. And he also had a passing touchdown in that game. The Jaguars are a bottom 10 matchup for running backs. They've only allowed 1 backfield over 100 rushing yards this season. And Breece isn't seeing enough in the receiving game, even if they do start trailing. So I don't see enough upside there. And there's just as much of a chance of him getting 6 as there is 16. And even 16 isn't going to help you that much.
The fantasy gods, I don't know if I'm going to sit Breece Hall because my other option is Kyle Monange. Whatever. We don't have to talk about my we're going to back to the people. Who's your favorite start for week 15?
So I didn't want to give something a little too obvious or like say this top 20 guy is going to be a top 20 guy. I was looking at some of everybody's rankings this week, and Darius Slayton is outside the top 40 at wide receiver for every single person on ESPN ranking.
Okay, that's me.
It's more of an upside play. It's like you said, maybe you need to put somebody in your flex spot who's going to get you that upside because Taylor's not going to produce. He's averaging nearly 13 fantasy points per game in his last 3 games with Jackson Dart. I think people are overreacting to what happened when Jameis Winston was under center. Winston has a history of locking in on one target, and oftentimes it's a deep threat, like a Mike Evans when he was with Tampa. And it ended up being Wan'Dale Robinson against Detroit in that game. We saw a couple deep passes, and all of a sudden was like, that wasn't supposed to be Darius Slayton's role. But I don't think they've changed Robinson's routes into deeper routes for forever because of that. I think Winston just locked in on him, and they were able to be successful. Now that Dart's back, I think Slayton is going to be more usable. Like I said, 13 fantasy points in his last 3 starts with Jackson. And I think he's had a couple touchdowns taken away as well. One was on a penalty, and one he had in his hands and dropped as he went to the ground. So there was room for even more upside there. And now they get Washington this week, who is one of the worst pass defenses in the league, if not the worst by a long shot.
Do you want to play a game, Kevin?
I love games.
I'm going to give you 2 categories or 2 players, and you are going to tell me if you like this or that, and we're going to go for it.
Okay, let's do it.
All right. These are 2 fantasy receivers. Which one would you prefer to start in Week 15? Adonai Mitchell or John Mechie? This is a Jets question for you.
I'm going to go with Mechie. Mitchell is much more of a boundary receiver. The Jaguars are much more of a slot funnel, inside funnel. And if we're going to be chucking deep late, I don't think it's going to work out very well. I'd rather get the short PPR catches from Mechie instead of A.D. Mitchell.
Contrarian take, don't hate it. Bigger betrayal, Edwin Diaz to the Dodgers, couldn't resist, or Lane Kiffin to LSU?
Could I one-up both of them with Pete Alonso to the Orioles that happened like an hour ago? My Mets fandom is in shreds. I don't know what to do with myself anymore. I'm going to say Edwin Diaz to the Dodgers, and not just because I'm a Mets fan, but because you knew this was who Lane Kiffin was. So it was unsurprising to me that Kiffin left. Diaz was a surprise.
When someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. Absolutely. More likely to be the fantasy MVP, Jahmyr Gibbs or Jackson Smith-Njigba?
I'm going to go with Gibbs here. The Lions are fighting for the playoffs. JSN has had some games where he's not performed, and the Seattle offense is much more prone to just dialing things down when they have a lead. Their defense is good. Their run game is solid enough, and he's been 40-50% of that offense for such a long time that I do still have a little bit of a fear that it's unsustainable, and there's a chance always with receivers that if they don't catch the touchdowns, they're stuck at 6 to 8 to 10 points.
Better hang Elphaba or Glinda?
Glenda. Whether it's
What?
She is delusional, but she'd have a good time.
Would you have a good time just sitting there praising her nonstop? If you don't give her attention, she's going to flip out. At least Elphaba could ride you on her broomstick.
I would assume that we'd be out and doing things and not just literally just sitting and chilling and hanging and talking. If it's just a casual hang and whatever, then I'll go with Elphaba. But
I mean, you've been full of contrarian takes, so I'm not surprised, I suppose. The fantasy QB you'd rather start in Week 15, Jacoby Brissett against the Texans or J.J. McCarthy against the Cowboys?
I'll start McCarthy. If I have to roll the dice with one of them, McCarthy can run a little bit. The Cowboys are a pass defense that you can still have a little bit. So it's not comfortable by any means, but I'll go McCarthy.
Who would win in a hypothetical fight, Darth Vader or Thanos?
Does Thanos have the Infinity Stone Gauntlet, or how does this work?
I mean, yeah, sure. Let's say Darth Vader has his red sword, lightsaber, whatever it's called. And Thanos has got his crystals.
Actually, hotter take now, Darth Vader, because he has control of the Force and can do things from further away. If it was him, it would be Thanos, but Vader can choke him without having to be standing there.
I would love to have control of the Force, but that's for another time. Thank you so much, Kevin, for providing all sorts of context and information this episode. It has been a delight to have you. Can you tell everyone where they can find your work and, how to follow you, I suppose?
So I'm on Twitter. I am Pulsivity, and Pulsivity with an extra E in the middle. It's not the easiest thing to get through. But you can find all my work on ESPN, shows anywhere. Sunday mornings, FF Now from 10 to 1. I do all the graphics. I do some script writing. I also work on SportsCenter, First Take, NFL Live, basically any show. Not every show all the time, but all my work can be found out there.
Kevin, you are an absolute delight. Even if I feel like you would ditch me for Glinda, that's weird.
No, not you. No.
Last call!
Today we learned that my rushing upside may have been on display at Hump and Hannah's, that Alphaba, even with that crazy cardigan, is apparently a bad hang, and that courage is a requirement in fantasy. I hope you play brave. And whether you finish first or dead last, please remember that nothing is worse than settling for the middle. Big thanks to Kevin Pulsifer for joining the show and playing along, and as always, to producer Quentin for keeping me honest respectfully. Be sure to check out my Week 15 edition of Facts vs. Feelings, the column, which is currently live on the .com. And remember, you can leave us a voicemail. You guys are doing such a great job. Please keep it up. The number to call is 914-348-1893. Until next time, may your facts be solid, your feelings be right, and your bus be someone else's problem. Good luck in the playoffs!
Love you, Liz. I'm hoping you like my voice. It's Tyree from Brooklyn. I just wanted to get the number in my phone. I'll call back with a question next week. Love you, Liz.
Ooh, double love you, Liz. How about that?